Okay, welcome to another episode of Coffee Samso. We're here at the Mill Point Bookshop Cafe in South Perth, my usual spot. Here today with Christian Isterday from Hot Chile. We're talking porphyries, we're talking large deposits. Christian, maybe a good way to start, maybe just intro yourself and then we'll just go from there.
Sure, thanks Noel. Yeah. I mean, nice setting to have a nice chat.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, I've been the founder of Hot Chile since we listed the company on the ASX back in 2010. And a lot of the Australian market would remember Hot Chile from those days when we had a very good early success with Productora, a large project on the coastline over in Chile, and really, really well endowed with infrastructure, a great success story in terms of its discovery. But like many of our counterparts in the industry, the period between 2014 going forward, there was a 5-year period where we had I like to sort of say almost a mass extinction event in the copper development space. And
I think mass extinction in every commodity at that time, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we put 250 million tonnes together, open pittable, large-scale copper gold deposit on the coastline of Chile. But at the point that the music stopped and the copper price started rolling back dramatically, we were effectively caught with half the mine life we required to develop that project. So I guess the last year has been really transformational for the company with the acquisition of this new large-scale discovery next to Productora.
Yeah, I think in 2015, I think even our very rich cousin, the oil and gas industry, suffered.
Yeah.
So the poor cousins, all the mineral commodities, we just got flattened, I think, literally.
Yeah.
But I could see the recovery come back, and I think, look, a slow recovery is always good. I think we've discussed this before.
Sure.
I mean, look, I remember Hot Chile very well because we have a mutual friend, Ken Lim.
Yes.
It was a bit of it was good because every week we caught up, and he's quite senior in the industry. Unfortunately, he's passed, but it's good to see that you guys are still, plodding along and
Ken was one of our very early seed shareholders, and
yes, I remember that.
Very unfortunate in this life where you have very good colleagues and family, and cancer's a terrible thing that I think touches the lives of most people, and it was very sad to lose Ken, but counted him as a good friend.
Yeah, well, Ken was. I thought he was an accountant until I spoke to him, and he would be really, ecstatic where you guys are now, and that you're still around.
Yeah,
you guys have been around for a long, long time.
It's been said to me quite a lot, and probably getting louder. That Hot Chile just is a completely different company now with the acquisition of Cortadera. We went over there with a vision to build a large Australian flagship copper developer, and to do it at low altitude and make it very conventional and move into the big space of copper. I mean, a lot of the Australian market is not as familiar with the copper industry as it would be with gold and nickel. It's very much a bulk commodity, and it's mined as a bulk commodity. And Chile contains some of the largest open pits and undergrounds operations in the world, and accounts for some 30% of the copper production globally. So what better a place to set your sights on going big into a commodity like copper than going to Chile. So to our surprise, as I said before, we spent 2 years once we found out about Cortadera and that a private discovery had been made, literally just on the other side of the Pan American Highway, and that became a really core focus for the company. Securing that asset, we saw that asset and its potential to be just added to Productora, bring in some of the high-grade satellites that we'd already started securing, and a pretty transparent and clear multi-sourced operational strategy to bring it all together. But we didn't count on what occurred in July when we'd we were only two months fresh with the first drilling at Cortadera after the acquisition was announced last February, and we tested the largest porphyry of the 4 porphyries they discovered over about a 2.3 kilometre discovery zone. And what do you know, the previous exploration team that discovered this thing and in fact wanted to drill those holes before the rug was pulled out from underneath them and their asset was handed back to the Corolla family. And yeah, it's funny, you know, geology, how it works, and when you see 23,000 metres of drilling and no closeout drilling on 800 metre intercepts, you know you've got to take up and stand notice. And it's interesting through this journey, you know, how many people assume that they understood what we had, and including the company. And to be sitting here 5 months, 6 months post that high grade 200 metre, nearly 1% copper, half a gram gold intersection at depth, and to be sitting here with something that now is twice what we thought we could achieve there, and something that is still largely open. And you know, we very much have one of the key new discoveries globally in the big copper space, and something that we're not afraid to say that this definitely looks like it's on a pathway towards achieving a tier 1 inventory. And you know, I think the last time we caught up, Noel, you know, I hear a lot of noise around me, you know, uncertainty in terms of, you know, how is a little company, $10 million, pull off a 30 million US transaction? Where are you going to get the money for that? And a lot of uncertainty around the company, because we've just re-rated the company almost 3 or 4 times in the space of a year. But you know that there's a lot of trees, and sometimes you've got to look at the forest, and the forest is what happens when a sub $500 million company puts together a tier 1 inventory and does that in short order. You're holding something that's, you know, got an in-ground value of plus $40 billion US. It certainly doesn't go unnoticed. So we've had a lot of attention and we've got a lot of work to do, but Cortadera is performing very, very well at the moment.
I mean, I think last time we caught up, we spoke about the article that I wrote about porphyries and things like that. And personally myself, I mean, we hear about the word porphyry and being a geo and everything, especially if you've never worked in that industry. You go, oh yeah, you know, big stuff, you know, long life. But you don't actually know. I mean, if someone came up and said, oh, what's the economic value of a porphyry? I personally wouldn't know. I mean,
That's right. And our industry isn't really geared to it here in Australia. I mean, you know, it's quite perplexing, because we actually have our largest gold miner, which isn't actually Bill Beaumont, great guy, but Northern Star. Most people in Western Australia would probably think that Bill and Northern Star are the largest gold miner, but it's actually Newcrest, and they're the largest gold miner, not just out of the suite of global mines that they operate, but they operate very large-scale, low-cost undergrounds in Cadia, Ridgeway at the moment. You know, that's you know, the absolute engine room behind record profits for Newcrest. So in terms of like a deposit style for a bank of metal, and a bank of metal, you know, featuring 2 key, you know, commodity classes in copper and gold, and obviously the other co-credits that come with these things. It's purely an economy of scale thing, but these deposits are going to become increasingly important to global supply of those key metals. You hear a lot about even the gold majors. You know, when was the last plus 20 million ounce gold deposit found in the world?
Long time ago.
In fact, you know, you can probably count the 1 or 2 plus 10 million ounce gold deposits, and certainly none of the giant 50 million ounce gold deposits have been found for decades. They're becoming increasingly hard to discover. So when you get a porphyry style ore body where gold is a key credit, and the operational costs can be covered by the primary commodity being copper, or in the case of Cadia Ridgeway, it's about a 50-50 balance. You know, Cadia Ridgeway is producing down at sub $200 an ounce, and throwing out very large metal production. So, you know, these deposits are very leveraged to price improvement, because they're long life, low cost assets. but they are very capital intensive. So they very much appeal to the major players in the industry in copper and gold, the BHPs, the Rios, the Newcrests of this world, and certainly companies have got plus billion-dollar balance sheets behind them.
Because that's a key point. That a lot of people don't understand that when you have a porphyry, yes, it takes a long time to define one, vectorize it, and know what you've got, and capital intensive to start. But
once you're
cheap.
You're onto it, and even with the drilling, I mean, a lot of people also, when I did this presentation at RIU, and I said, most people are asking, how are you going to pay for this? And there was a gasp across, 500 people that I heard through the room. One of the other realisations is when you're drilling porphyries, and we're only drilling 1 kilometre holes, and I say only. I preface that with, because that would sound like very, very deep drilling by Australian standards, but these things, the very best of the porphyries in the world that have 1 to 2 kilometre ore columns, that's a feature of some of the best in the world, and when you're drilling 1 and 2 kilometre holes, you're also balancing that off against a drill spacing that's more like 150 metres by 150 metres. And the amount of metal that puts together with one hole, you're talking maybe a $400,000, $500,000 drill hole, but when you can add, a step out on a 1.2 kilometre vertical column like Cordilleras main porphyry currently is, you're adding 50, 60 million tonnes of material at a time. So these things are quite effective in terms of their metal build, but yes, when you're talking about developing them, you've got to throw up a lot of large capital constraint into this. So they need to be big, and they also need to exhibit features that give you the ability to develop high grade. And so with Cordillera, the emergence in 5 or 6 months of this large high grade core that is now just plunging open-ended and still expanding laterally, those type of things add a different dimension, and they really start putting the porphyry into a very exclusive club of porphyries that have that ability to throw off high grade production. So Cordillera is showing all the hallmarks of something pretty special at the moment, and certainly nothing that the ASX is showing. And we talk about the top 25. Thank you. Great. One of the things that I've introduced into our presentation is just almost a scorecard, because we are in the exploration space.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
And so the scorecard is always at the end of the drill bit.
Yeah.
What exactly are we hitting? And to have 5 of the top 25 copper gold results reported globally in the last 2 years, and to have 5 of those, it really is a poll of who's who in the industry. I believe that it's towards the beginning of the presentation.
Yeah.
And what you see on that list, there really are 5 key names. Sol Gold, with their fantastic Cascabel discovery, and the thing's over 10 million tonnes of copper and over 20 million ounces of gold now. They have a lot of those drill results on that list. Regulus Resources from the TSX with their Antiquary project up in Peru, about 500 million tonnes at the moment, and sort of halfway towards a tier 1 asset, and certainly continuing to grow. And Hot Chili, and outside of that you have Rio Tinto that has 2 results on that list from Winu. And Zijin Mining, following their $1.4 billion acquisition of the Timok deposit from the guys over at Nevsun in Canada. So to be the only ASX player really on that list, and with 5 in a matter of 6 months, I think that the scorecard looks pretty good for Hot Chili going forward.
It's interesting. I just looked at the numbers. 972 metre at 0.5%. If you do simple sort of grade 1 maths, and you double the percentage, you halve the meterage, you're talking about 450 metres at 1% copper.
Yeah, I mean close to 500 metres at 1%.
That's a lot.
Or you want to go down to 50 metres at 10% copper.
Yeah.
I mean the metal weighting works the same. But and a lot of people are quite surprised on the ASX, because I was at the Fremantle conference, and Chris Cairns and a fantastic exploration team over at Staveley. Many years spent working on Thursday Gossan and unlocking the sort of secrets there, and being able to deliver a great intercept. But 32 metres at 5% is fantastic. Very concentrated, very high grade, very much aligned with that sort of fast investment preference that the ASX has in gold and nickel style investment. But you weight it against a near kilometre intercept at that grade, and it doesn't even go near being on a global list like that. So I think in context of what we've done, and also you look at the Alkane intercepts, also another fantastic exploration discovery story going on at Boda. And the Boda discovery, I mean, looks like it's unlocking something really exciting. A potential Cadia Ridgeway analogue being touted. But once again, probably their most recent intercept, their 600 odd metre intercept, probably would get onto that list now. So we're certainly in very good company, Noel, and it's happening very quickly as well.
I mean, it's interesting because this kind of long intercept, deep kind of drilling is slowly, I wouldn't say it's more common, but you hear of it more, like Great Lane Gold with the Patterson stuff there is coming out, and I think the market's slowly sort of digesting what it is, and I think now people like myself get to understand what you're actually drilling. You're drilling a massive deposit. It just happens to be a kilometre down.
That's right.
But you're
talking about 970 metre intercepts being supported by over 400 metre plus 1% copper equivalent cores. One thing that's really interesting for what we're doing, and this all talks about the risk of any development. Firstly, we enjoy a very rare development setting in terms of infrastructure access, and that was 8 years of our life putting that together with regional partners such as CMP Cap, having access to easements for water, for power, surface rights to build tailings infrastructure, and access to ports 50 kilometres away, sealed road. All of those things are really important in terms of doability of discoveries that turn into development stories and then eventually turn into mines. But one thing that's really key here is, we don't know what Cortadera is going to become. We certainly can see all the hallmarks. It's going to probably move it into the tier 1 space. Obviously with continuing successful results as we expand it. But one thing that we do have is a real head start on any other development. We spent 10 years putting together a 2.5 kilometre long satellite pit now for Cortadera at Productora. So we have 250 million tonnes and 10 years of bulk tonnage, 0.5% mine life, ready to go next to us. But Productora, if we were to reschedule that and think about that as a satellite, we would certainly be able to pull out a large high-grade front end to that. And then when you look around this cluster of deposits that we put together, at Cortadera itself, we've been starting to test some of the high-grade chalcocite near surface, recording intercepts like just before Christmas of 26 metres at 1.7% copper, 0.7 grams gold. So we have access to bulk tonnage, high-grade at Cortadera, at Productora, and then don't forget these little cherries that we've got 4 kilometres away at San Antonio and Valentina, ready to go open pits that can produce 1.3% copper, 0.3 grams gold. So we've got a front end profile that can probably more than pay for all of the development of this project, setting up the infrastructure and the plant, etc. And what that is a very big de-risker. We're not talking about going underground straight away and starting to talk about plus $1 billion block caves being set up. So we do have that natural advantage inherent in the deposits that we're developing, where we're developing them, on the coastline with infrastructure, and indeed in the country that we're developing them. We're in Chile in a tier 1 jurisdiction, mining friendly investment area, and you add all of that together and you're talking about a multi-sourced, open pit, large scale underground development that is definitely going to push this thing into several decades of production profile. And when you're talking about big deposits like this, undoubtedly they're going to take very deep pockets to develop them, and the people with the deep pockets are going to want to know that they can put their investment into a stable jurisdiction, make it a long-term investment, and corner large supply of copper and gold for 20, 30, 40 years out of these projects. So it's a very different capital intensity profile that we have on this type of development.
I mean, from my point of view, I think there's no doubt you'll find what you want to find, and there's no doubt that it will be big. From the fact that you are, as you say, you're in the right jurisdiction, you're where the porphyries live, and there's plenty of evidence of how big these things are, and you're no different in terms of what that you are porphyry to everything that's there. So I think one or two things going to happen is that someone's going to come in and fund you, and because everybody knows this kind of things work in the amount of metal content that you will have. There's probably a lot of these corporate things, a big big gorilla comes along and says, I want that, and I mean that's always it's cheaper for them to go and do
that'll
this.
That'll be up to our shareholders at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, it's what I'm trying to say is that it's probably cheaper for these guys to come in and do this than it is to go and spend the time and money in the 10 plus years to develop something to a point where you can say, hey, let's go mining.
That's right. And the pathway takes us inevitable, interesting, twists and turns as you go forward. At the moment, we've just got to keep our head down, keep focused on the geology, doing very good geology, good drill planning, and a very methodical expansion of this discovery. We haven't closed it out yet, so very important to us early is to determine what the actual magnitude is here. And so that's our focus. We're keeping our boots on the ground very much with that at the moment. But, before I was talking about a lot of things that are actually very, very conventional about what this discovery looks like and what the vision of a multi-sourced, open pit, underground, high-grade access to underground material at front end, high grade, long life access to bulk tonnage underground going forward after the large scale pits are exhausted. And all of this sounds very conventional. Access to infrastructure, good jurisdiction, low altitude. But I think it's the interesting thing about Cortadera and the discovery story that's going on now is what makes it special. And as most people know, we had Steve Garwin, a very experienced porphyry geologist, join us around July, August of last year, come on board to help lead our technical team outside of his current role in leading Sol Gold's technical team on the Cascabel discovery and drill out. Indeed he consults around and helps other companies, but he's been instrumental in our understanding of how Cortadera wanted to grow, and the really smart modelling that we're doing is turning into great drill success, and a few things that he explained to us about what we were actually onto really did put Cortadera in a special box, and it wasn't just the geology and the fact that this porphyry looks like a type 2 soft in the middle porphyry, the ones that like to cave and have phyllic alteration associated with high grade in the middle of the system, as we're seeing in the high grade zone. When we're drilling these things on these kilometre holes, I get my drill report every morning. We get a number of key things that we like our senior geologists to indicate to the technical team helping in the design of these holes. And I really just move straight to how fast did we drill? in the 24 hours. And if we're doing 80, 100 metres, 110 metres in 2 shifts of drilling, I know that we're going quickly, and I know that we're actually going through the high-grade zone. So it's not just the characteristics of Cordillera that make it special, similar to Cascabel, similar to Wafi, similar to Grasberg, these type 2 giant porphyry deposits. They're all gold rich, and we see that at Cordillera as well. So that's one of the special things that we recognise on the geology side. But it's also getting feedback from some of the industry, and particularly the institutional space. And when you sit down with key fund managers that manage a lot of money in North America, and their background is actually in Chile, working in the copper industry in this area, and they say, Christian, I mean, these results that you're showing the market, I haven't seen these kind of results come out of the coastal range of Chile in my career. And in fact, I don't know of many deposits in the coastal range of Chile that have thrown up results like this, particularly in the porphyry space. A lot of the understanding of the Chilean metallogenic belts is broken up on age groups of the porphyry intrusives and deposits that stretch for 5,000-6,000 kilometres, all the way up into Colombia. Chile, obviously having the lion's share of the Andean belt, but the coastal range belt and the IOCG and porphyries down the coast have not typically thrown up these kind of grades or sizes. And so a lot of people say, well, are you dealing with the Cretaceous porphyry? Because Cretaceous porphyries, there hasn't been one of these type of things found, or the grade is a little bit lower, and actually all of the best stuff has been eroded off the top of them, and we don't have the chalcocite zones, and we don't have all of the different mineralisation and enrichment zones that sit over the top of these things that are preserved in the Andes but have been eroded off in the coastline. But when you're working in Chile for 12 years, and actually that geology is not that simple. And we're going to be aging the Cordillera porphyry in the coming months, and we've got a lot of samples being sent off to various university groups. But one thing that Steve Garwin taught me is never ever assume that a deposit can only be this big or in this class because it should only be. Best to wait until the work is actually done to actually understand what we're dealing with, because for me and for our team, we don't really care about models. It's about grade and it's about tonnes. And the experts in the world that want to fit something into a box early, as they tried to do with SolGold for Cascabel. Cascabel was never meant to be that age. It was always meant to be in a belt that would never throw up a tier 1. And much to the enjoyment of Steve and the SolGold team, obviously they proved everybody wrong and went all of the dates, and I think they did 30 or 40 dates in the story Steve tells me. It was only then that the technical community said, oh, that's okay, it fits over in this box, and yes, it can be a giant deposit now, after it was already a giant deposit, of course. So, we see a lot of special things happening here, and they're being recognised for what they are. And but you also have to navigate 10 years of Hot Chile being known for Productora, and a deposit that was great in a good time, sent the company to a $250 million market cap company, made a lot of people in Perth and Australia a lot of money, and then parked up and lost a lot of money for a lot of people for a long time. But ultimately, the company's ethos is about rolling our sleeves up and never giving up and persisting, and we found a way. We've had a lot of luck this year in what's unfolded. We certainly didn't see this turning out to be what it looks like it's becoming. But I think that the industry recognition is starting to sort of, say, well, that was Productora's and Hot Chile, and that was phase 1 for this company. But as I began this chat with you, Hot Chile is a very, very different beast now. We never had access to a deposit that could throw off results, or the sizing of what's happening now at Cordillera. And to be very honest, these things don't happen very often in one's career, and you don't see deposits like this found very often. So we certainly know what we've got, and it's pretty exciting.
I think it's interesting. You mentioned all those things about what people perceive it to be and what it became. It's very, very synonymous with those big deposits or the different deposits that people end up having.
Yeah.
I mean, a best example from what my experience is, I'm a big diamond fan. It's like the Argyle lamperite. It's a lamperite. It's not a kimberlite. All of the stuff down in Ellendale there, that's all a lamperite. They're not meant to have kimberlite's the only thing that can carry diamonds.
That's right.
And things like that. And you probably can go down the list of how many of this Gold Road.
And in my experience, isn't it interesting? And I mean, I've only been in the industry for some 23 years, so I may be young to the industry, Noel. But in my short experience,
making me old now.
But in my short experience, I've often found that model-driven geology, and in fact, a very close friend of mine and one of the key consultants of Hot Chili, a guy by the name of John Beeson, very well-known geologist around Australia, one of Placer's key structural geologists that I worked with in my time in Placer. He said, that anyone that marries a model, it often ends in a messy divorce.
Yeah.
And the best deposits in my career that have been found are the deposits that were found when they weren't meant to be there, or that wasn't meant to exist, or this deposit style doesn't happen, or it can never be that big given it's in these rocks. Every time that has been the backdrop, those discoveries have often been some of the industry's best. So I'm enthralled by the chatter about what Cordillera should be, could be, can't be, but ultimately the drill rig will do the talking, and we'll see.
I think in some respect it has. I remember when you first put the first results out, someone flicked it to me and said, "Oh yeah, that's a big discovery hole." I didn't know what it was, but I said if you looked at a section, a drill hole with that kind of stuff, you found whatever you're looking for, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And you followed it up with things. But I think it's like the
But you get a lot of caution in the industry, and you get a lot of people that almost want to put the hurdles in front of a discovery that you don't know what the discovery is yet. Starting to guess what you need, what grade it has to be, what size it has to be. It's very hard to sort of start putting a fence around something when you actually don't know what you're dealing with. So I think that we'll start to understand it as we go, and a lot of that will be borne out by when we start closing it out eventually.
It reminds me of the story of Gold Road, where they are. That's not meant to be an endowed greenstone belt for a while, and then
Tropicana, very similar.
When I look at Hot Chili, I'm thinking, okay, there's no doubt that you got something fantastic there. How big or how much bigger it will be, that's a story yet to be told. But then you look at the corporate side of it, you've got 50 million market cap.
Well, a year ago we were 10 million market cap.
10 million.
Yeah.
And you got something that's potentially could be in the billions, and people might go, oh geez, it might cost you a lot of money to get this up and going. That's why the first thing I think about is, share price, that's not bad. It's quite easy to double that. See, the thing is, I think this, I touched on this earlier in our conversation, is that the winners, the Great Langolds, your story, they're slowly coming out, and people are suddenly realizing, and then when they start to understand metal content, which, if you go to speak to sort of smaller companies where they talk about metal content, I always say, well, if they start talking metal content, means that the resource is not that fancy, because the metal content number is always much better. And if when they look at your stuff, which we touched on, like how many meters at 1%, you start thinking, hey, this is big. And when
the good thing about having a large metal content is metal content and resource grades are never the grade.
Yeah.
It's a variable deposit, like all deposits in the world are variable, and that means when you start to say, well, like a billion tonnes, for instance, if Cordillera ever got to 1 billion tonnes, at the kind of grade it is, you're talking about 5 million tonnes of copper, 7 million ounces of gold. And you say, oh, but at that grade, well, that's the bulk envelope. And then you say, well, no, from surface across 3 of the 4 porphyries, we've got bulk tonnage, 1% copper, 0.5 gram gold. We go at depth and we talk hundreds of millions of tonnes in the high-grade component of the sulfide. You're talking about, something that will throw up naturally elements and large elements that are more than capable of being developed when you benchmark them against some of the better large-scale copper mines in the world, and even in the Australian market. The Australian market clearly understands 1% copper and above. You look at the mod transaction with Sandfire, 50, 60 million tonnes at just under 1% copper and taken out for $167 million. So, there's certainly very good, good ability to be able to monetize large metal inventories.
And I think the fact that you guys can, in some ways, pay yourself down is very important, because people don't realise that to get down there, if you can pay yourself down,
yeah, of course,
which you can, if you had a great big open pit on top of you, that the question might be, the answer would be different.
Yeah.
But the fact that you don't, and you can actually get yourself down there, you may not be making so hit. But once you hit the high grade stuff, it's...
Yeah, and look, just having Cordillera is going to generate quite deep pits on it. I mean, we were modelling this thing before the acquisition, putting pre-feas level pit designs over it because of all of the vast knowledge bank we built up with Productora. And just assuming that this was going to go to Productora, not the other way around, which obviously means the pits will probably be a bit bigger without that transport factor. But, it's going to support some very large open pits. Those open pits are going to dive into the high-grade sulfide as well as take out the high-grade chalcocite enrichment. And, like I say, having 10 years of bulk tonnage from Productora and 14 kilometres, we're talking about a distance that pales in comparison to such deposits as Nueva Union, which is a tie-up of Relincho and El Morro, 2 big deposits, Tech, Barrick. They're conveyor belting that 42 kilometres through 3 large mountains. So 14 kilometres away, Productora very much becomes just a constant feed into that profile, and probably a centering of the deposit and all of the processing actually at Cordillera itself.
That's right. In some ways, people need to understand it's a bit like the super pit. Super pit hasn't got super grades. It's a earth moving process.
That's right.
And when you're that big, your grade actually doesn't need to be very big. And from talking to few guys, a lot of these porphyries in Chile or South America, heap leaching is a huge thing and you don't actually want high grades,
That's right.
And it works fantastically well for them because of what it is, and they've got tons and tons and tons of ore.
Yeah.
And we over here in Australia don't think like that. I had this conversation with someone. They said, I think when you mention heap leaching, they say, oh, your ore's not so good, that's why you get a heap leach.
Yeah.
Whereas over there, it's not. Same as the Indonesian stuff,
Yeah, and we've been doing a bit of work on the large underground copper mines in the world, sub-level caves typically, and block cave operations that are balanced off of, just terms of looking at the potential of what what operational environment an underground at Cordillera might look like. And certainly the grade becomes the first thing you look at. Is the grade on a gold equivalent or a copper equivalent, in line with operations, and tick is all we can say at this point. We'll be bringing out some more work on that in the coming months in our presentations. But when it matches with some of some of the very good projects around the world mining that underground, you've got to be pretty confident. You start to look at those operations and say, well, exactly how are they taking out those grades? Because it shouldn't make sense in the Australian context.
Yeah.
How are they mining at that scale with those kind of capexes at 0.8% copper, or in Cadia's case, I mean, would be lucky to get to 0.8 grams gold equivalent. I think what is it, sort of half a gram gold, 0.3% copper. These operations on the block cave on a very large scale, they again, we come back to the operating cost against how much revenue you make out of a ton. These are things are throwing off revenue margins from 60 to 160%. That's like, on average, if it's costing them, say, $25 to $32 a ton to produce, but they're pulling out, $70, $80 on a ton. They're pretty good, very, very healthy revenue margins. And you long life these things, and you set a block cave up, or a more nimble sub-level cave in terms of your flexibility, what you can do with them. These things can be prolific producers at very low cost bases. So I'm pretty confident about what we're seeing coming together at depth. And when you build these big things, there's often a lot of people who will say, well, you're drilling in one spot. And you drill in one spot on porphyries that just grow at depth laterally because of the metal that we talked about that you can add rapidly, but particularly when you can add the high-grade component starts growing as well. They're no-brainers, and you want them vertical. You want them so they can draw vertically over time, like Wafi or Grasberg or El Teniente or some of these great operations like Cadia. So you need them to exhibit all of those characteristics, and certainly the work that we're doing on the benchmarking around these type of things, Cortadera is sitting really, really well in terms of where it's heading.
I mean, people forget Grasp is still pumping out a lot of money. And it's been around for 40 years or something like that.
Yeah, one of the great gold deposits of the world.
People would still jump at owning that pit. I always tell people, when you talk about porphyries and say, oh, what's so good? Just imagine a volcano and the lava's flowing out the volcano. That red stuff, that's the ore body. And there's no tap, right? And imagine it underneath. So then you sort of give a perspective of like what you're talking about,
Yeah.
But Christian, thanks for giving me the time.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go on forever. This is fantastic.
Yeah, I think I've rabbited on way too much.
No, it's good. I mean, look, as we said the last time, most of the people that invest in this probably wouldn't know how to spell Cadia or where it is or what it is.
Yes.
And that's just an education thing, I think. But with the onset of Winu and Gretland, people just suddenly understand this deep stuff actually works.
Yeah. We're just lucky it comes from surface,
Correct.
But no, I mean we have a long road ahead of us.
Yeah.
What's pleasing is how fast we're moving in a short period of time. So I think a key catalyst this year is a first resource estimate, and like I say, if we're able to put together what looks like it's coming together, we're going to be in a really, really unique position. So it's exciting year this year ahead, and I'll finish on a great story I can pass to you from a shareholder that came up to me at a conference last week at Fremantle at the RIU conference, and he was very pleased, and he came up and shook my hand, and I recognised him from the year before where we presented the acquisition. And he said, "Oh, Christian, I just wanted to say hi and thank you very much, and I'm a shareholder. I bought shares at 1.8 cents, and when you presented here last year." And I said, "Oh, I hope you're happy." He said, "Oh, very, very happy." And he said, "But I was speaking to my broker, and my broker, and I won't name the house, protect the innocent, Noel." He said to me, "Oh, what do you like at the conference?" And he said, "Oh, well, I'm very happy with hot chili." And my broker said to me, "Oh, well, hot chili. Well, if you see Christian, I want you to, ask him this question. What happens when you run out of the cash that you've got in the bank? Ask him that question." And and he's sort of relaying this to me, and I said, "Wow, well, it's a powerful question, Because the last time I looked, we were listed on the ASX. We've had a strong history of raising capital without discount. In fact, I think in the entire company's history, we might have done 2 raisings with a small discount. But most importantly, you know, that gasp in the audience when I presented this $30 million acquisition. Last year, we found support for no less than $20 million in funding very readily, increasingly being supported by large institutions, both here and abroad. And I have no doubt that we've got a lot of interest in what's happening, both from the corporate side and the institutional and fund space. And I think that I sleep pretty well at night in terms of whether we're going to be financed and whether we're able to meet our payments going forward. We sit in a very enviable position that we're able to now have a lot of dialogue with the right types of groups, and you know, and carefully decide who we want to have involved in the Cortadera discovery, not how are we going to get $1 million or $2 million or $3 million and just keep this going on an oily rag. So I think the coming months ahead, when Hot Chili does decide, because we do have good money in the bank and we are able to take our time and make that decision for the best interest of all shareholders, that when we do that, I imagine that a large part of the uncertainty on the stock, people saying, why isn't this 150 million market cap, will largely just evaporate in an instant. And I imagine when it does, that broker can probably, you know, maybe ask his client why he wasn't looking at Hot Chili himself.
No, I looked at your major shareholders. I mean, there's big names there, Sprott and all these kind of people. So I think you've gone past that 2 million oily rag part. I would hope so anyway. I think you are.
Yeah, well, the $1, $2, $3, $4 million oily rag stuff that kept us alive was what our major shareholders supplied to us for 5 years of pain, and that's the whole reason why Hot Chili is one of 5 or 6 copper developers left while we're still here. And yeah, we got beaten up, and we got absolutely ground down to a shadow of what we were. And to even think that 250 million tonnes at 0.5% in Productora with $100 million invested was worth $10 million shows you, you know, what kind of coiled spring is set up here with a discovery like Cortadera.
But that's a good answer to the question. You know, someone's willing to pump in all that money when you were struggling. Now your light's at the end in the tunnel with a big light in the back there.
Look, this is the strongest Hot Chili has been in many years, and probably never a position that we thought we'd find ourselves in.
All right, Christian. I hope maybe next time we can have another chat and give us another. Maybe I might have to call your PA to get an interview by then. But anyway, thank you.
No, great to see you again.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.